Ma'am?
Ay, wake up to. Ay, ito.
Tayo na? Close mo.
Sa email nyo, ma'am, yan, no? Diretso sa email nyo, ma'am.
Close mo naman bago mo. Close mo. Join. Pati naman ano, ma'am? Open yun. Wala, actually, hindi na kayo dyan.
Ay, nakamusing ka.
The eighth session of the Senate in the third regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. May I call on Senator Cynthia Villar to lead the chamber in prayer. Senator Villar, you are recognized, ma'am. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Almighty God, dear Father, we find inspiration with the words, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. That is from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. We come before you today with grateful hearts for the opportunity to serve the Filipino people. As we begin the Senate session, we seek your divine guidance and wisdom. Thank you for entrusting us with the care of this beautiful nation and its abundant resources. Help us to be faithful stewards of the environment, especially as we face the challenges like oil spills on our seas, sulfur dioxide emission from volcanoes, flooding on our streets and homes, natural disasters, and the effects of climate change. Guide us in implementing measures to ensure the safety of our people and the sustainability and cleanliness of our seas, land, and air. May we work tirelessly to support the farmers, fisher folks, and the communities affected by these calamities. Grant us the wisdom to provide effective solutions to their problem. As the Filipino people navigate through daily life challenges such as high prices of commodities and lack of opportunities, we ask for your strength and wisdom. Help us to create policies that alleviate their burdens, provide sustainable opportunities, and foster a spirit of resilience and hope. Further, we pray for all our athletes who compete in the Paris Olympics and in all other competitions. May their sacrifices, hardship, and efforts be not eclipsed by contentions and differences. We are truly grateful for the glory they are bringing to our nation. Guide us, Lord, in every discussion and decision we make today. Let our actions be driven by our dedication to serve our fellow citizens. Remind us of our responsibility to care for this earth and each other. Strengthen our hearts in every good work. We place this session in your hands, trusting that with your help, we can overcome any challenge and build a brighter future for all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Session is suspended. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I think we have to call the roll first, Mr. President.
Secretary will please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, Senator Zubiri, the Senate President.
With 22 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, before we proceed with the approval of the journal, I'd like to welcome some of our guests here in the gallery, guests of Senator Joel Villanueva, Mayor Charis Escalona from Quezon, Municipality of Perez, Mayor Clarita Natividad of Patnanungan, Mayor Bosque of Pulillo, with the councilors from the province of Ifugao, Mayor Joel Bongalion from Banawe, Mayor Archie Liquindo from Asipolo. We also have visitors from the barn, visitors of Senator Subiri, members of the Parliament and staff of the Committee on Basic, Higher and Technical Education, headed by Member of Parliament Eddie Ali. Guests of this representation, the Mayor of Lawak, Pangasinan, Mayor Ricardo Balderas, Mayor Gualberto Sison from Agno, Pangasinan. Guests of Senator Cynthia Villar from the Municipality of Gumaca, Quezon, Mayor Webster de Letargo, Vice Mayor Banyal, and councilors, several councilors as well. Guests of Senator Ejercito, Mayor Bugalion of Banawe, Ifugao. Guests of the Senate, we have the municipal officials from Bawang La Union, headed by its Mayor Eulogio Clarence Martin de Guzman. Guests of Senator Aimee Marcos, Mayor Roland Paulino, and Mayor Roland Paulino Jr. as well, and Cynthia Paulino. Guests of Senator Estrada, Mayor Al Taculad of Duero, Bohol, and Ms. Alu Cayetano.
On behalf of your Senate, welcome to the Philippine Senate. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 6th session Monday, August 5, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Same is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we defer the approval of the journal of the 7th session, Tuesday, August 6, 2024, at a later hour.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Same is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate resolution 10.
Session is suspended for a minute.
Mr.
President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business. I so move, Mr. President.
Secretary, please read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate Number 2767, establishing the Mariano Marcos State University Hospital, a Level 3 hospital at the Mariano Marcos State University, Province of Ilocos Norte, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Marcos.
Health and Demography, Technical and Vocational Education, and Finance.
2768, prohibiting dissemination of false information on bomb threats, explosives, or any other life-threatening or destructive materials, and providing penalties therefore. Senator Tulfo.
Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution Number 1115. Resolution conferring the Philippine Senate Medal of Excellence to Filipino gymnast Carlos Edriel Caloy Poquis Yulo for making history at the 2024 Paris Olympics as the first Filipino to win 2 gold Olympic medals. Senator Cayetano P.
Rules.
1116, congratulating, commending, and conferring Carlos Edriel Caloy Poquis Yulo with the Philippine Senate Medal of Excellence for clinching a historic double gold medal at the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, France. Senator Villar M.
Rules.
1117, conferring the Philippine Senate Medal of Excellence to 2024 Paris Olympics bronze medalist Ira Villegas. Senator Estrada.
Rules.
1118, congratulating and commending Filipina boxer Aria Villegas for winning a bronze medal for the Philippines in women's flyweight 50-kilogram division at the 2024 Paris Olympics. Senator Revilla Jr.
Rules.
1119, congratulating and commending Ira Villegas for honoring the country with an Olympic bronze medal at the women's 50-kilogram boxing event at the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, France on 7 August 2024. Senator Zubiri.
Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before we recognize Senator Robin Hood Padilla for a short manifestation on the current situation of our OFW brothers and sisters in the Middle East, this representation as chairman of the Senate Committee on Ethics would like to express our appreciation for the members of the Committee on Rules who signed and produced a new Senate Ethics Committee on Rules. This is a 47-page Rules of the Senate Committee on Ethics, which we will be providing to all the members of this chamber. And this was already published in a newspaper of general circulation, Mr. President. And I believe the new rules that came out from your Committee on Ethics is not just a mere procedural update, but a profound commitment to strengthening the very foundation of our legislative institution. These rules are designed to foster a more inclusive, transparent, and effective Senate, ensuring that every voice is heard and every action is accountable. The new rules aim to streamline our legislative procedures as well as enable us to respond more swiftly to some of the challenges pressing our nation right now. The rules would likewise emphasize transparency and accountability in a time when public trust in government institutions is paramount. I so submit the product of the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is seeking the floor for a short manifestation. I move that he be recognized.
Senator Robin Hood Padilla is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at sa atin pong pinunong mayorya. A'udhu billahi minasyaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Ginoong Tagapangulo, pinunong mayorya, mga miyembro ng lupon na ito, nais ko lamang pong magbigay ng maiksing manifestasyon sapagkat nakarating na po sa atin ang ulat ng kagawaran ng Ugnayang Panlabas o Department of Foreign Affairs na minomonitor din nila ang kasulukuyang sitwasyon po sa Middle East, sa Israel, Lebanon at Iran. Ito po ay kasunod ng assassination ng Hamas political chief na si Ismail Haniyeh sa Iran noong nakaraang linggo. Bunsod nito, nagbigay na po ng pahayag ang pamahalaan ng Iran tungkol sa pagganti nila sa Israel na pinaghihinalaan po nilang nasa likod ng asasinasyon. Hindi naman po sa pananakot, ngunit hindi po biro ang pangyayaring ito sapagkat libo-libong milya man ang layo nila sa ating bansa. Hindi po nangangahulugan na wala itong magiging epekto sa ating mga Pilipino. Nais po nating malaman sa ating ehekutibo kung ano ang paghahanda ng ating isinasagawa para magiging epekto po ng tensyong ito. Paano nito maapektuhan ang ating ekonomiya? Alam niyo po, ang stock markets po sa Amerika ay nagbabagsakan, sa Japan po ay bumagsak na din. Dito din po sa ating kahapon, nakakakita na rin po tayo ng mga senyales na pabagsak. Paano po ba lalaki itong krisis na ito? Paano po ang ating mga overseas Filipino workers? Secured na po ba ang lahat ng mga conflict areas na ito? Sa pagtataas po ng alert level din sa Lebanon, handa na po ba tayo na ilikas ang ating mga kababayan na nandun? Alam po natin na mayroong mga tumatanggi noon na huwag umalis kapag may conflict areas. Pero paano po sa ganitong mga sitwasyon na para pong ito ay kumukulo na? Handa po ba ang ating mga ahensya, partikular na po ang DFA at ang Department of Migrant Workers? Ginoong Pangulo, nagsasalita po ang inyong lingkod sapagkat hindi po natin ito dapat ipagsawalang bahala. Nangangamba po tayo na baka na naman po tayo mabulaga sa matinding epekto nito sa ating bansa sa usapin po ng seguridad at ekonomiya. Hangad po natin na marinig sa ating mga ahensya na meron pong tayong sapat na preparasyon sa usaping nito sapagkat naniniwala po tayo na itong mga ganitong bagay, kapag hindi po ito naayos kaagad, ito po ay lalawak. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Tagapangulo.
Maraming salamat, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move for a 5-minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Gentleman from Bukidnon is seeking the floor on a point of inquiry, Mr. President.
Yes, the gentleman from Bukidnon, recognized, Senator Zubiri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have the agenda for tomorrow. It's mostly local bills on holidays and hospitals. Just a question on the holidays, because there are four measures here for non-working holidays. I recall that we have a standing rule. It's an internal rule between the senators and this institution that we have agreed with the different departments, particularly on the request of the DOF and DOLE, to limit the number of holidays. But our standing rule is we've come up with this rule wherein if the province has no holiday, legislated holiday, then we will allow it. So my question, Your Honor, and the good sponsors here, Mr. Majority Leader, Senator J.V. Ejercito is here together with the Majority Leader, Mr. President. If it's possible, if I may ask the good sponsor, Senator J.V. Ejercito, if the province of Samar, and ito, kung sa Bisaya pa, walay pabor-pabor. There's no favoritism here because there's also Bukidnon here. The province of Bukidnon, the province of La Union, and the province of Marinduque, do they have already a legislated holiday for these provinces?
Mr. President, before you answer, I'm being tempted to raise a point of order, but I'm not raising a point of order because it appears that only Senator Subiri has a copy of the tomorrow's agenda. I'm a bit surprised, Mr. President, because when they were talking on the sidelines, I asked actually the staff on the floor to give me also a copy because it's unfair, Mr. President, that we are discussing something that only Senator Subiri and appears the majority leader would have a copy of this. Because now I'm surprised that there's a session tomorrow. I am surprised, really, because I know that there will be sessions, but I remember during the caucus, the sessions will be discussed few days before Thursday session. So I'm surprised that right now we're going to have a Thursday session and the agenda is already out and I have not received a single document, Mr. President.
Yes,
I think it's I believe, Your Honor, well, the majority sponsor, majority leader can answer this question. My apologies. The good gentleman is asking, Mr. President,
Yes,
why
For the information of the good gentleman from Bulacan, the entire agenda, including the agreed upon agenda for Thursday, which is tomorrow,
And I don't have anything,
was
Mr. President.
provided last Monday.
May I raise a point of order, Mr. President, now? Now that I'm being tempted to raise a point of order. The gentleman from Bukidnon is asking something with, in possession po niya, yung agenda for tomorrow. This representation had not seen or received anything, Mr. President. So how can we participate?
I think, Mr.
Just
President, this was electronically transmitted to all the members last Monday, Mr. President.
Last Monday?
Yes. Yes.
Mr.
Viber
President,
and
again,
everything.
if that's the case, Mr. President, may I also ask, Mr. President, did the Committee on Rules introduce changes in the practice of this August chamber since the 17th and 18th Congress on the releasing of weekly agenda? Because I remember yesterday, the good gentleman from Bukidnon, Senator Zubiri, raised that local bills sponsored were not included in the agenda. The presiding officer and the majority leader noted, however, that these measures were included in the weekly agenda. Now, I'd like to point out, Mr. President, if the weekly agenda was given to us Monday, considering or without admitting it was released on Monday, isn't it, Mr. President, the Committee on Rules and the Senate, Senate's practice, that this weekly agenda is being released on a Thursday of the preceding week? Am I correct, Mr. President?
I think the agreement during that executive caucus meeting was that it should be released on the Monday. Because the Thursday session, allow me to finish first.
As I will.
I still have the floor, Mr. President. We're following rules. The Monday's release is to cover in advance a notice to all the members for them to scrutinize the agenda as well as to oppose any measure included therein. That was included during that caucus, executive caucus, I think 2 weeks ago, Mr. President, if I'm not mistaken. And indeed, Mr. President, the agenda for the draft agenda contained all the bills, including the Thursday session, which is tomorrow. And if you will just look at your Viber messages, including those given to your COS, indeed, this was submitted in advance. Because if it is a Thursday session, Monday is still a good notice for the members of this chamber to have a copy of the said agenda. A three-day notice, Mr. President, is still a good head start for all the members of this chamber. I think that's the explanation, Mr. President.
May I be allowed to
Yes,
respond, Mr. President?
Senator Villanueva.
Mr. President, my question is simple. Are we now introducing changes in the practice of the 17th and 18th Congress, wherein we actually release the weekly agenda on a Thursday of the preceding week? That's all I ask, Mr. President.
I think, Mr. President, I answered that. That's given during a Monday.
So it means we are introducing changes, Mr. President.
I think if the good gentleman can point a specific rule wherein a requirement before a session convenes on a Monday that the Thursday before all the agenda items should be released, I think that would be an appropriate point of discussion. But I see no rules. The word practice was mentioned. That's why, Mr.
That's
President.
exactly my point.
That's why, Mr. President, we're now on the 19th Congress, and prior to the start of the session, there was an executive caucus, and upon agreement of the members present during the caucus, and if I'm not mistaken, the good gentleman was even there, all agreed that on a Monday, the agenda matters should be submitted, and there was no lapse on the part of the Secretariat. It was indeed submitted, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
But we started
may I
with
just
the-
point out, Mr. President?
I still have the floor. We started with the query coming from the gentleman from Bukidnon, which
And I'm raising a
probably
point
should
of
be
order, Mr. President.
which probably should be answered by the chair.
But I'm raising a point of order, Mr. President, and the presiding
Mr.
officer did not at
Can we
all.
let the majority leader finish first his manifestation or
But that's a
his
raise.
statements?
I'm raising a point of order, Mr. President.
Continue.
May we have the ruling of the chair?
Can I have a minute suspension?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there is a pending query coming from Senator Zubiri.
Yes, yes, Mr. President. I just want to put on record, I have nothing against the local bills. It's just that, so that I do not have to come back tomorrow, maybe I can just already ask the sponsor today, just for the point of information. It's a point of information on 4 measures that are non-working holidays. With the permission of the majority leader, of course, and the permission of the president, may I ask the sponsor, Senator, your beloved brother, Senator JB, to answer the query?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As a rule in the Senate, we have an understanding because of the concerns of the Department of Labor, the Employers Confederation, that we usually grant only 1 non-working holiday per province and city. For example, the province already celebrates or has a measure already that has a non-working. We do not give any more to the towns or cities. So, with regards to your query regarding the 4 measures that will be taken up tomorrow, Summer Day, La Union Day, Araw ng Bukidnon, and Araw Marinduque, we have already checked also that they do not have any legislated measure yet, no, regarding their non-working holidays. And most of them also had, like Samar, La Union, and Araw ng Bukidnon, they have recently have 3 consecutive proclamations declaring our special non-working holiday in their respective days, no, that they are requesting, Your Honor.
So, Mr. President, with the permission of our dear colleague, Senator JV, just for the record, sa probinsya ng Samar, wala pa pong legislated holiday, non-working holiday.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
There's none.
Mr. President.
Or the province of La Union, there is also none, not a single holiday for the province of La Union that was passed in the 50s, 60s, or 70s.
There is none, Your Honor. We have checked that yung pong those that we have checked that have already a declared a legislated non-working, we do not
Hindi kasama sa listahan.
include anymore.
So for the record
these
as well.
4 are, we
So,
have already checked
just
that
for the
they do
record,
not have.
isa-isahin ko na lang para for the record.
Yes.
Sa Bukidnon, my beloved province of Bukidnon, wala din.
None, Your Honor.
Okay. So yung Kaamulan Day siguro and all, it is only requested to the Executive Secretary.
Yes.
Usually, ina-applyan ng province yan sa Executive
Yes,
Secretary.
they have been granted for the past 3 consecutive years already. They have been issued a proclamation.
And then last but not the least, how about the Araw ng Marinduque? Marinduque province.
Araw ng Marinduque was given only 1 proclamation, so they do not have a
And
legislated.
only for that year.
Yes, that's
They
correct.
have no legislated.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So I just want to put that on record, Mr. President. I have no
Mr.
objection
President.
to these 4 provinces.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I, with the
Thank you very much,
indulgence
Mr.
of my 2 colleagues, Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
perhaps it would be better if we would have a policy already, Mr. President, as to whether or not we're gonna tackle such measure, if it actually fits to our agreed upon policy here in the Senate, wherein 1 per province, 1 per city, Mr. President. So if that's the case, Mr. President, we will no longer schedule the agenda of these measures if they do not fit with the requirements that we have set, Mr. President, here in the Senate. I think this would help our distinguished colleague, the chairpersons of these respective committees, whether it's health or local government committees. As otherwise, Mr. President, it will be redundant. Every single time we're going to have a Thursday session, this particular question being asked by the former Senate President Zubiri will be asked as well. If I can only, that's my suggestion, Mr. President. I submit to the wisdom of the body.
Thank you, Senator Joel. What does the majority leader say?
Mr. President, I think the courtesy and respect due to an equal branch in the legislative sphere, the lower house, submitting a measure approved on 3rd reading and transmitted to this chamber and referred to a committee, in this instance, the Committee on Local Government. And having conducted hearings, Mr. President, I think the appropriate course of action would be to have the committee make its committee report, submit every measure coming from the lower house to this chamber, and let this chamber decide so as not to really prevent, suppress the actions coming from a co-equal member of co-equal branch of the legislative branch of government, Mr. President. We cannot prevent the House of Representatives from transmitting approved measures to this chamber. We cannot prevent any committee of the lower house from conducting hearings. We cannot impose upon the lower house a suppression rule because we have such a policy adopted. Though it may probably conflict with some labor laws or be duplicative and redundant, Mr. President, we cannot prevent, out of respect and courtesy, we cannot prevent the lower house from transmitting bills to this chamber. So policies probably would come during committee hearings and let the plenary decide per bill transmitted to this chamber, Mr. President.
Mr. President, let it not appear in the records of this August chamber that we're trying to suppress or in any way disrespect the work of our co-equal branch of the legislature branch of government, Mr. President. What I'm saying, Mr. President, is we have talked about it. So what's the point of agreeing to this policy during that caucus, Mr. President? But again, Mr. President, we can again change our minds. We can discuss these measures one by one, despite the fact that we all agree during the caucus na one holiday per province. Because, Mr. President, we have so much holidays, and the presiding officer, being the former chairperson of the Senate Committee on Labor, would know that there's really so much, Mr. President. In my home province in Bulacan, there was a time that there's a national holiday, provincial holiday, city holiday, and town holiday in 1 week, Mr. President. So can you just imagine the situation of our business entities in that area during that time? So again, Mr. President, it's good that we can discuss all of this in the committee hearings and in the plenary. That was just a suggestion, and if that is the case, then expect these questions will be raised in all the committees involved, whether it's the Committee on Local Government or Committee on Health, etc., Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2665 under Committee Report number 251. This is the bill on the Philippine Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, the resumption of consideration of Senate Bill number 2665 under Committee Report number 251 is now in order.
The parliamentary status of this bill is that we have closed the period of interpellation, and with the consent of the body, there being no committee amendments, I move to open the period of individual amendments, and I seek recognition, Mr. President, as a sponsor of the measure, and to propose amendments, may we recognize the Honorable Minority Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Okay, hearing no objection, period of individual amendments is in order. Senators Tolentino and Pimentel are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first proposed amendment is to be found on page 4, line 28, I move that we remove the words or the phrase any additional or. I so move, Mr. President.
May we ask from the minority leader how it would read after the deletion proposed?
Now the Section 8 first paragraph will now read as follows. Section 8, factors for selection. The following factors shall be considered by the President in the identification, proposal, and designation of the coordinates of the archipelagic sea lanes specified in Section 6 hereof, as well as in the establishment and designation of substitute sea lanes or air routes, colon. That will now be the phraseology of Section 8, first paragraph, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendments approved.
On page 5, it appears that it's obvious that lines 1 and 2 are parang ano tawag mo doon, just a redundancy or a repetition. Maybe at
Can you
maybe,
mention the
page 5, lines 1 and 2,
archipelagic?
from archipelagic sea lanes all the way to substitute sea lanes or air routes, colon. I move that those lines be deleted, Mr. President.
To
Just delete them because I think they are a repetition of what is found in
the detailed
in page 4, lines 26 to 28. Parang nagkamali lang po to na may computer software error, Mr. President.
I agree, Mr. President, we accept.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, amendments approved.
Now, the reason why we move for the deletion of that phrase earlier, which refers to the additional sea lanes, is because we are now moving for the deletion of the entire Section 9, which is found on page 5, lines 17 to 19. So in effect, we are deleting now this concept of additional archipelagic sea lanes. I so move, Mr. President.
And before we accept, Mr. President, may we know the rationale for this, just for purposes of statutory construction?
Because this is, Section 9 is a delegation of power to the President to provide additional archipelagic sea lanes. And during our interpellation, the sponsor and this representation were in agreement, and there were no other opinions expressed anyway, that the identification and the establishment of archipelagic sea lanes is primarily legislative power, Mr. President. And it is in our decision now not to delegate this legislative power to the President for him to add to the sea lanes that we are identifying in this measure. And then for the information of everybody, we are only identifying or establishing 3 archipelagic sea lanes under this measure, Mr. President. So that would be the effect, Mr. President, that we delete the entire section because of a policy decision, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President. Indeed, it is a congressional action is needed, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendments approved.
And of course, the styling na lang, Mr. President, I move that the affected sections be renumbered accordingly, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
So that would be all from this representation, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we thank the good minority leader, and I think there are no more amendments to be proposed. I thank the good minority leader for the appropriate amendments that really refine this measure, Mr. President. Mr. President, with no other individual amendments, I move to close the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, considering that this is a very important bill, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2665, Archipelagic Sea Lanes Law. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Senate Bill 2665 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move for a minute suspension.
Senate session suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution 1099, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution numbers 1109 and 1112. This is the resolution expressing the profound sympathy of the Senate on the death of Mother Lily Yu Chu Monteverde.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to
Secretary, please read the title.
Resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of a pillar of the Philippine entertainment industry, veteran film producer and Regal Films matriarch Mother Lily Yu Chu Monteverde.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Revilla, the main sponsor for his sponsorship speech.
Senator Ramon Bong Revilla is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last August 4, 2024, the Philippine entertainment industry lost one of its pillars. Dama ang lungkot ng pagkabigla ng industriya sa paglisan ni Lily Yu Chu Monteverde, o mas kilalang Mother Lily. Nagsimula po si Mother Lily bilang isang fan na nag-aabang sa labas ng mga film studios. Sinusundan daw niya mga artista at pinapanood niyang mag-shooting. At isa nga sa hinahangaan niya ay yung aking ama sa labas ng LBN at Sampaguita. At sabi pa nga niya sa akin, alam mo, mas gwapo sa'yo ang tatay mo. But levity aside, doon daw siya na-inspire na pumasok sa industriya at paglaon maging isang producer. In pursuit of this dream, she started by putting up popcorn machines in theater lobbies. Masaya daw siya noon kung kumita ng 100 pesos a day.
Hello.
That's how it all began. Yung dating fan na humahabol-habol sa mga artista, yung dating gusto sanang maging artista, ang naging daan para sa pag-usbong ng karera ng mga bituin at pagyabong ng industriya ng pelikula. On a more personal note, si Mother Lily ay napakalapit po sa aking puso. Bukod sa malaking ambag niya sa aking karera sa showbiz, kung babalikan ko po ang kasaysayan, malaki ang ginampanan niya sa buhay namin ni Lani na dating Regal Baby at bilang ninang namin sa kasal. I may not be a Regal Baby, but I am mother's baby. Para akong nawalan ng ikalawang ina. She was always there for me and Lani. Lagi siyang nandyan para kamustahin ako, payuhan at akayin. Lahat ng importanteng kabanata sa aming buhay, lagi po siyang present. Alam naman natin na kadalasan kapag may unos na pinagdadaanan ng isang tao, nababawasan ang mga nakapaligid sa kanya. May mga inakalang kaibigan na biglang nawawala sa tabi natin, pero si Mother Lily, never niya kaming iniwan. Umaraw, umulan, pinili niya kaming samahan. She was truly a mother to me and to many others. Parang tunay na ina na papaluin at papangaralan ng anak kung magkakamali sila. Her temper was quick to rise, yet quicker to calm down when things are cleared with her. Pero gaya na rin ng isang tunay na ina, hindi siya kailanman nagdamot sa pagmamahal at papuri sa mga good take, box office hit, at mas malalim na aspeto sa paggawa ng mabuting ikinagagalak ng ating Panginoon. She was not perfect, but even then, she was greatly loved by everyone in the industry. Maliban sa mga artista, niyakap din siya at minahal ng mga kasama natin sa press at minahal din niya pabalik. Mother Lily always had our backs. Anumang bangungot ay napapalitan ng kalma sa mga kwento at payo niya. Hindi yan nahuhuli sa balita, lalo na kapag may pinagdadaanan ka. Kaya napakalaking kawalan ang kanyang paglisan. You may ask the biggest stars of show business, and they would tell you how much Mother has made an impact, not only in their careers, but in their lives. Hindi lang siya lumikha ng mga pelikula. Higit dito, nagsilbi siyang tanglaw sa marami mula sa kanilang pagsisimula hanggang sa pamamayagpag ng kanilang karera. Sa industriya ng pelikula at telebisyon, kilala si Mother Lily sa kahusayan niya sa pagbabalanse ng negosyo sa isang banda at ang pagpapayabong ng sining at kultura sa pamamagitan ng mga pelikula at paglabas sa kabilang banda. Ang dami niyang pinasikat na artista, ang daming kwentong pinalaganap, thousands of films and shows produced, napakaraming buhay na hinaplos, napakarami ang pinangiti at binigyang kulay. Sa dami ng kanyang natulungan at nagawa, nakatatak na siya at hindi malilimutan sa industriya sa larangan ng sining. Naalala ko po yung panahon na daang-daang pelikula ang pinipilahan sa takilya. Mother Lily, having mastered her craft, was able to prove that quality films can be produced even with very minimal time and resources. At the height of the Asian financial crisis in the 90s, the industry managed to not only survive, but thrive. Totoo nga, mothers know best. And Mother Lily knew her business like the palm of her hands. In hindsight, Mother Lily's vision was not only practical, it was essentially trailblazing. Siya ang isa sa mga haligi ng industriya na nagbibigay ng daan upang maraming istorya ang mailahad at mas maraming pelikula ang maipalabas. Yan ang pamanang iiwanan ni Mother Lily. Wala na sa kamison ang magic ni Mother, nasa pagkamalikhain ng kanyang isipan at sa tapang niyang sumugal sa mga proyektong pinaniniwalaan niyang makakatulong hindi lamang sa industriya ng pelikula, pati na rin sa sining at kultura ng ating bayan. Mother Lily will always be remembered for her relentless pursuit of goals. She would never stop halfway through the battle, but would stick it through until the end. She finishes what she has started and perfects what she has begun. And she has reached the last chapter of her journey. We are certain that she had no words left unspoken, nor mission left unfinished. Ang kanyang di matatawarang kontribusyon sa pelikulang Pilipino ay laging magsisilbing inspirasyon at gabay sa marami pang henerasyon ng mga artista, direktor, at lahat ng nasa likod ng industriya. Sa kanyang paglisan, mananatili siyang yaman ng industriya. Walang makapagpupuno ng iniwan niyang ambag, hindi lang sa mundo ng entertainment industry, kundi sa puwang ng aming mga puso. You will be greatly missed. Muli, Mother Lily, maraming salamat sa iyo. Paalam. We love you. Talagang love na lang ako yan. Isa ako sa paborito niyang sa mga action star. Wow! May utang Diyos na niya. Sana ako. Marami siyang na-applause, marami siyang pinasikat na artista, superstar. Kumbaga, iba yung tatip, iba yung That's Mother Lily. Mother, I love you. This was the last time I saw her personally, a year ago. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Revilla.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the resolution, Mr. President, is Senator Grace Poe. Senator Joel Villanueva is...
I give way. Mr. President, ladies first, I'm giving way to our dear Senator Lauren Legarda. I will give way, Mr. President. Please.
Senator Lauren Legarda is recognized.
Today we gather to honor the memory of a remarkable woman who has left an indelible mark on the cultural fabric of our nation. Lily, Mother Lily, Yu Chu Monteverde was not only a pioneering figure in the Philippine entertainment industry, but also a nurturing spirit whose kindness and vision touched the lives of many. Mother Lily was a pioneering female film producer and the founder of Regal Entertainment, where she produced numerous notable films that have become an integral part of our cultural heritage. Her vision, generosity, and resilience were evident from her earliest days in the industry. She championed the the production of quality Filipino films, tirelessly discovering and nurturing local talent, and providing countless opportunities for artists and workers. Her remarkable contributions were recognized with numerous accolades, including the Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Cine Manila International Film Festival and the Film Development Council of the Philippines, as well as the Gawad Lino Broca Lifetime Achievement Award and the Fernando Po Jr. Lifetime Achievement Award. Through her dedication, Mother Lily helped many carve their names in the industry or the history of Philippine cinema. On a personal note, I sadly mourn the loss of Mother Lily as a dear friend of more than 2 decades and maternal figure who supported me through life's many challenges. She brought out a side of me I deeply valued, often proclaiming that I give 110% in everything I do. Her words always inspired me, touched me to strive for excellence. Her friendship was a gift, her mentorship a beacon, and her legacy a guiding light for all of us. I share in the grief of her beloved children, as well as her grandchildren, and all who were touched by her enduring presence. Mother Lily lived a life full of purpose and passion, and her memory will forever be treasured by those who knew her, who loved her. Thank you, dear Mother Lily, for a life well lived and a legacy that will forever inspire us. You will always be remembered with love and gratitude.
Thank you, Senator Ligarda. Thank you, Senator Villanueva, are you next?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, this representation joins the sponsor of the measure in expressing our deepest sympathies and condolences to the family of the late veteran film producer, Mother Lily Monteverde. Isa po siya sa mga haligi ng industriya ng pelikulang Pilipino. Pinamunuan po niya ang Regal Entertainment Production Company na nagatid po sa atin ng mga hindi malilimutang pelikula katulad ng Mano Po, Sister Stella L., Makiusap Ka sa Diyos, mga kwento ni Lola Basyang at marami pang iba. Malaki po ang kontribusyon ng mga pelikulang ito hindi lamang sa paghulma ng tamang kaugalian ng bawat kabataang Pilipino, kung hindi maging ang pagmamahal sa Diyos at sa bayan. Namit ko po si Mother Lily, Ginoong Pangulo, matagal ng panahon at napabilib po ako sa nais niyang maging role sa kanyang buhay para maging ehemplo ng daluyan ng pagpapala ng Diyos sa mundo ng pelikulang Pilipino. Si Mother Lily po ay nagsilbing ina na gumabay at nagbigay ng pagkakataon sa mga maningning na pangalan sa showbiz, mga mahuhusay na filmmaker at sa napakaraming manggagawa sa industriya. Her passing is indeed a great loss to the movie and television industry. Kaya po, ngayong hapon na ito, pinapaabot po natin ang ating taus-pusong pakikiramay sa kanyang buong pamilya, sa kanyang anak na kaibigan po natin, si Don Monteverde, mga kaibigan at sa lahat po ng tunay na nagmamahal kay Mother Lily. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo, at pagpalain tayong lahat ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Thank you, Senator Joel.
Mr. President,
Joy Leader.
next to co-sponsor, Senator Grace po.
Senator Grace po is recognized.
Vibrant, fearless, passionate, fiercely loyal, fun and funny, loving. Mr. President, parang pelikula ang buhay ni Mother Lily. Gaya rin ang mga pinoproduce niya. Makulay, masaya, puno ng tagumpay, at minsan mga hamon rin. Ang hindi ko makalimutang kwento ay kung paano siya tunay na na-in love sa kanyang naging kabiyak. basketball player noon, si Father Remy Monteverde daw ng San Beda. At pinapanood niya palagi yan. At si Father talagang lapitin sa mga babae. Pero alam naman natin si Mother, what Mother wants, Mother gets. So, si Father at si Mother ay kinasal at alam na natin, ilang taon silang nagsama at sa ngayon, kinalungkot natin ang pagkamatay ni Father Remy, ngunit pagkatapos noon, bigla na namang si Mother naman ang sumunod. So, till death do us part talaga silang dalawa. Inalagaan niya si Father, siguro sabi niya, tapos na ang aking tungkulin. Nagawa ko na para sa aking kabiyak, para sa aking mga anak, para sa ating bayan. I still remember the words of Mother Lily when she endorsed my senatorial bid in 2013. At that time, kulelat ako sa survey, nasa 20 plus. She said, as a mother, I feel it in my heart that Grace will make a great senator. And she said, remember, mothers know best. Standing here today on my second term, almost at the end of my term, I hope I made my ninang proud. Isa po siya sa pinakaunang naniwala at ipinahiram sa akin ang kanyang mga lugar para maging campaign headquarters sa Imperial Palace Suites nung ako'y tumakbong senador at walang funding. Even when I was still in the MTRCB, she had always believed in me, supported me, and assured me whenever I doubted myself. Sabi niya, ayaw ko sanang umalis ka sa MTRCB. Pero sa tingin ko, marami ka ring maiaambag kung nandyan ka na sa Senado. Pero maraming kwentong nakakatawa si Mother. Pagdating dyan sa MTRCB, kasi kabangga niya palagi yung mga chairman ng MTRCB bago pa ako. At ang kwento sa akin noon, may mga billboards kasi sa EDSA ng mga pelikula. Dati, di ba Senator Bong, lahat yan, drawing, hindi naman yan printed, di ba? Hindi tarpaulin. So pinatawag siya kasi napaka-sexy ng mga outfits ng mga babae doon sa billboard. So sinabi daw sa kanya, nako, pinatawag siya ng MTRCB, sinabi, Mother, ba't naman ganyan yung mga billboard mo? Parang yung mga suot, napaka-revealing. Oo, nakakamison. Kasama daw si Lolit Solis, ang kunento is, ay nako, pasensya na kasi nung umulan, nahubaran daw lahat natanggal daw yung pintura. Obviously, alam naman niya hindi naniniwala yung but that's how her humor is, no? Ito yung kwento lang naman po sa akin. Pero ganun pa man, si Mother, I remember, we used to talk about the novels that she used to read. A lot of romantic Chinese novels. Kasi di ba, marami dyan yung mga kwento tungkol sa mga pamilya, centuries-old families, extended families, that became the basis of her movie Mano Po, of which my mom was a part of. It had many, many sequels. And then, lumalabas rin yung pagkamakabayan niya kasi ginawa niya din ang Sister Stella L. Ang hindi ko rin makakalimutang kwento tungkol sa kanya, dati naman kasi walang cellphone. Pero sa office ni Mother Lily, maraming telepono, iba-ibang lines. At minsan, may kausap siya sa isang telepono, pinapagalitan niya, tapos dito naman, sasabihin niya, I love you. Di ba? So dito, sasabihin niya, ikaw, yan. Tapos sa kabila, I love you, I love you. So Mother Lily is the first multitasker. Okay? That's why she was able to produce so many films. She's like a dragon lady. But even if she was fearless, she was kind, as I mentioned. So, Mother Lily is like a family to us, and really, I even made her ninang during my wedding because I admire strong women like her. Alam mo, madali naman, the reason why I think she has produced a lot of memorable films, because the easiest thing to do is just give up on the movie industry. Dahil minsan, di ba, ang daming problema, ang daming dapat asikasuhin, mayaman na siya eh. Ba't pa niya kailangan gawin yon? Marami siyang binibigyan ng trabaho. And the root of it all is because Mother Lily herself is a movie fan. And for you to be a movie fan, you really know what the masses look for. But you also give them an aspiration to look forward to. So, Mr. President, I would like to pay tribute to a woman who has been somehow a part of my life too. Mother Lily is a romantic, a dreamer, a visionary, a movie fan, and a patriot. She will be greatly missed. As I said, she will always be a titan in the movie industry, never forgotten, always referenced. And it has been a privilege for me to have known her. And to her children, the ones that I know, my inaanak Meme, Rosel, who has worked along with her, and also Don Don, and to her other children and grandchildren, our deep condolences and prayers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Grace. Majority Floor Leader. Before I also have a prepared cause sponsorship speech, and I just wish to just insert it into the records, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, the following members would like to have their co-sponsorship speeches inserted into the records. Senators Lito Lapid, Robin Hood Padilla, as well as Senator Bongo. Mr. President, I move that there
Including this representation, Mr. Majority Leader.
and the Senate President Pro Temp, Mr. President. I likewise would love my co-sponsorship speech be inserted into the record, but just to have a small manifestation related to the same. I have worked with Mother Lily for 4 years, Mr. President, starting with Shake, Rattle, and Roll 12, Shake, Rattle, and Roll 13, Shake, Rattle, and Roll 14, Saucy Problems, and in 2013, the famous movie Girl, Boy, Bakla, Tomboy, and Shake, Rattle, and Roll 15, and Shake, Rattle, and Roll, and my Big Bossing as well for the Metro Manila Film Festival. These are all box office hits, Mr. President. So, naalala ko pa ho si Mother Lily, napakagaling po niyang producer at maalalahanin sa kanyang mga artista. So I'd like to have this, my co-sponsorship speech be inserted into the records, Mr. President. Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose amendments. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution 1099, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolutions 1109 and 1112, subject to style, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, proposed Senate Resolution number 1099, taking into consideration proposed Senate resolution numbers 1109 and 1112, subject to style, is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that all present members of the Senate be made co-authors of this resolution.
Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Can I ask for a minute suspension?
Mr. President, anent the resolution we just adopted resolution 1099 and the other resolutions pertinent thereto. I move that we designate Senator Ramon Bong Revilla to be the bearer of the just approved resolution to be given to the bereaved family members of the late Mother Lily. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
And Senator Revilla is requesting, Mr. President, for a minute suspension to enable him to receive officially the approved resolution from the presiding chair, Mr. President, perhaps with the presence of some of our colleagues here who are all made co-authors, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body and pursuant to Rule 10, Section 13 of the Rules of the Senate, I move that we elect the following members of the Committee on Higher Technical and Vocational Education. Number 1, Senator Christopher Lawrence Go. Number 2, Senator Lauren Ligarda. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2762 under Committee Report number 263. This is the bill on corporate recovery and tax incentives for enterprises to maximize opportunities for reinvigorating the economy or create more. A very kilometric title, Mr. President. Mr. President, I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, resumption of consideration of the said bill under the aforementioned committee report is now in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this bill is that we are now in the period of interpellation, and with the consent of the body, I move to resume the period of interpellation and recognize the sponsor, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and to interpellate the Honorable Minority Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Senator Gatchalian as sponsors recognized together with the minority floor leaders, Senator Coco Pimentel as interpolator.
Thank you, Mr. President. But before I propound the questions, Mr. President, just a point of inquiry. There are no more members of the majority who are going to interpolate on this measure, Mr. President, from our records, from our list.
I think, Mr.
Pia.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Pia.
I think, Mr. President, Senator Cayetano is making the necessary preparation, Mr. President.
She already started her interpellation, but she reserved another chance to continue her interpellation based on our conversation last night.
So we're just, yes, Mr. President, because we also need more time to study, but so as not to waste time, if we can just start with our interpellation for the, so we can get an understanding of the general objective, at least of the measure, Mr. President, with the permission of our
Yes,
very
I'm more than
hardworking
happy to
sponsor.
receive questions, Mr. President.
Yes. So, Mr. President, so the short title of our measure is, we use the term create more, di ba?
Yes,
Create
Mr.
more. So
President.
parang giving us the indication that this is a continuation or an improvement of the existing law na create. When was that create law passed, Mr. President?
2021, Mr. President.
Anong month po?
March of 2021.
March of 2021. Okay. So this is a tax measure, and then sometimes we give laws sufficient time to prove their worth before we amend, before we touch them, Mr. President. Parang three years later, we already want to amend the create law. May we know the reasons why, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, when we enacted the create law, it was in response to uplift our economy from the onslaught of the pandemic. And even after the create law was enacted, the desired results was not there, Mr. President. And at the same time, in the implementation of the law, there were also some ambiguities in the implementation of the law. That's why some of the existing registered businesses, RBEs, encountered difficulties in their operation. So twin objectives of the law is, number one is to further improve the investment climate in our country, and number two is to clear some of the vague provisions of the create law. And if the good gentleman would give us a little time, we'll show some slides in terms of investment climate. In slide 3, we looked at the different countries that have recovered or not recovered after the pandemic. We'll show that. So we compared it to the different countries in ASEAN. If you can see here, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, especially Singapore, has already recovered from its pre-pandemic level. Except for Thailand and the Philippines, we're still trying to recover the investment that investment level during the pre-pandemic time. So this is one of the reasons why we push for this bill, is to further enhance the investment climate of the country.
So the slide we're looking at, Mr. President, captures the data from what year, Mr. President?
This is pre-pandemic year. The pre-pandemic year is 2016 to 2019, and then the post-pandemic is 2020 to 2023, Mr. President.
So 3-year period po pareho?
Correct, Mr. President. So in other words, other countries have also introduced their own incentive booster, if I may use that word, and so that they can go back to their pre-pandemic levels, Mr. President.
So was CREATE enacted only to attract FDI inflows, Mr. President?
Well, the CREATE, when CREATE was being discussed, it was during the time of the pandemic, Mr. President. So the way to improve, the way to hasten the recovery of the country was to lower down the corporate income tax of all domestic corporations. No? So meaning from 30%, we lowered down to 20% for MSMEs, and then all the rest of the other corporations from 30% to 25%, Mr. President. In exchange, we rationalized the incentives being given by IPAs, investment promotion agencies. So we rationalized that, making it time-bound, the famous time-bound, targeted, and performance-based, Mr. President. So those were the buzzwords during those times in order to rationalize the incentives being given.
Okay, and then we measure the success or failure of the law by looking at FDI inflows.
One of which, Mr. President, one of which is the measure, Mr. President.
Can we, yes, and then what are the other metrics that we use to say that, the promises were not fulfilled, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, the cost-benefit analysis is also another measure that the DOF uses, and we can show that, Mr. President, slide 15.
Ano po yun?
Cost benefit.
Cost of what?
Cost benefit, meaning the amount of incentives that we are giving versus the amount of economic benefit that we are receiving. So in this particular case, Mr. President, just by looking at 2022, this is post-pandemic era, to simplify the explanation, for every incentive that we give, for every benefit that we receive, for every 1 peso benefit that we receive, we give out 0.53 incentives, Mr. President. So in other words, it's a positive results for our country. So in other words, the law is also generating enough interest and positive results in terms of cost-benefit analysis, Mr. President. So this is the other measure.
If the cost-benefit ratio is below 1, that means
It's benefit, Mr.
outweighs the cost.
Correct, Mr. President.
So if you use this metric, then the create law achieved its purpose?
Yes, it's also achieving its purpose, Mr. President. But if you look at the comparative FDI pre and post-pandemic, it's not enough. So in other words, because of the rationalization, we're now at a positive in terms of cost-benefit. But if you look at our pre-pandemic levels, we're not there yet. So in other words, we need to rev up the investment climate in our country.
Yeah, but if there are two metrics, one pasado, isa hindi, so tabla. So
well, Mr. President,
so what's the brouhaha all about, Mr. President?
Well,
meron din kung ito ba, Mr. President, we say that the create law is working, bringing us more benefits than it is costing us.
But just by looking at this, yes,
this
Mr.
one, yes,
President.
yeah.
But if you compare it to, again, the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, it's still we're still quite far off, Mr. President. So
Doon sa FDI inflows, Mr. President.
Yes.
Ba? Is that it?
Tama, sa FDI inflow.
Para po mas maintindihan ko po itong table 1 na nandito po sa sa screen natin. Kung gamitin natin ito sa Pogo.
Negative siya, Mr. President.
Hindi, siguro up to 10 siya, 5 or 10, di ba?
Yes,
tama?
Mr.
Ganun siya kataas.
Correct. Oo, tama.
Kasi ibig sabihin nun, talagang lugin-lugi ang lipunan.
Correct. In fact, the exact number there is using the straight line cost benefit is the country is using 99 billion annually because of the social cost caused by POGOs, Mr. President.
Ginamit ko po example yun para naman ma-inspire po kayo sa kasi kayo.
Saka si Senator Risa, Mr. President.
Senator Risa and Senator Sherwin use this to the benefit for our benefit, yung cost benefit ratio on POGO. So are there other metrics that we're using to evaluate the effectivity of that relatively newly enacted CREATE law? 2021 law po siya eh. Any other metric po?
Yeah, slide 2. Yeah, Mr. President, we also, this is a measure that a lot of the foreign chambers use in order to gauge the investment climate of the country. We'll flash it, slide 2, Mr. President. And this is a comparative FDI stock level of different countries in Southeast Asia. And okay, there. So in figure 2, Mr. President, if we look at the investment going into Singapore, they're getting close to about $23 billion a year. 23 billion. Hindi, yung absolute number. I need the absolute number. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Mr. President. Figure 1, Mr. President. Figure 1, Mr. President. Hindi ko lang makita. Singapore is getting from 2020. I just makita, Mr. President. From year 2000 to year 2020. In year 2023. Singapore received 2.6 trillion. $2.6 trillion in terms of FDIs coming into their country, Mr. President. As compared to the Philippines only got 118 million in terms of FDI stock, Mr. President.
Sige po. Siyempre, of course, since din ito, this concerns FDI, siyempre, we will also not fare well in this metric kasi yung metric number 1 is also FDI. So,
yes, FDI po, Mr. President.
This is also FDI, so understandably.
FDI po. So if you look at if you compare ourselves to Southeast Asia, we're actually at the bottom in terms of FDI, Mr. President.
So in the CREATE law, Mr. President, hindi ba we rationalized nga the IPA incentives, di ba? Kasi nga parang kanya-kanya sila. Kasi investment promotion agency sila, di ba? Kanya-kanya silang mga pagpapadala ng kanilang mga delegation abroad, pag-attract ng mga locators or investors sa kanilang lugar. And
tama, Mr. President.
We created the FIRB as the parang
the overseer.
Yeah, super agency na niya na lahat sila under that para mag-harmonize ng everything. So we rationalize, harmonize. The verdict is it did not even after year 2023, given the 3-year average, it did not bring us back to the pre-pandemic level.
Not yet, Mr. President. We're on the way there.
Not yet, but okay. Without amending it, will we? Tama pala, sir. Kung sinabi nyo not yet, what is the trend pala on a per year? Baka naman paakyat na.
Well, Mr. President, on a per year? We'll get the data, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, this is in attracting FDI, it's always a competition between our neighbors. And our neighbors are also doing they have their own strategies in terms of trying to bring back their investment level to pre-pandemic levels, Mr. President. So it's not only us who is competing with ourselves, but we're also competing with other jurisdictions. So that's why our gauge is going back at the very least to pre-pandemic levels. And that's why we showed in the slide that we're not yet there. But we'll get the yearly FDI starting year 2022, Mr. President, so that we can see if we're improving. No. We're just getting the data, Mr. President.
Kaya nga, kunyari, we look at the data and we change our mind na, okay, CREATE is not failing us. So, will we still pursue CREATE more?
That's why, Mr. President, the CREATE more is enhancing the existing incentive, Mr. President. So we're not we're using CREATE as a base because it was designed to enhance our previous incentives and then rationalize the incentives being given out. But then again, the pandemic struck, and we're now trying to go back to our old investment levels, and we're not in that level yet, Mr. President. So we're now further enhancing it so that we can hasten the return of our FDI levels.
Hindi po ba yung CREATE nga introduce the framework na how the different IPAs will be parang cooperating with each other and coordinating their efforts.
Correct.
There is this FIRB
Yes.
body on top of the IPAs.
Correct. Yes.
So that even the incentives will be harmonized, and then pati yung mga siguro the ranges, the caps.
Correct, Mr.
Oh.
President.
So
That's
that's supposed to be done now by the framework that CREATE law already established. Are we through law now tinkering with the specifics of the incentives thought of by the FIRB?
No, Mr. President, we're not touching the base incentives that we are giving already. We're just enhancing the incentives so that will improve the investment climate and compete with our we can compete with our other neighbors. I'll give you a very specific example. In Create More, Mr. President, we doubled the deduction for electricity. We all know that electricity cost in our country is quite expensive. And even though we gave 50% additional deduction, 100%. Ginawa natin 200. Sorry. We gave 50% deduction to electricity, but it's not enough. No? A lot of the corporations are saying it's still not enough because electricity costs versus, let's say, Vietnam or versus even Cambodia is more expensive. So we doubled it from 50% to 100% deduction, Mr. President. So these are the enhancements. So we're not going back to Create, but we're adding on the Create law.
Because we tied our hands by providing in the law that the maximum amount that could be deducted would be 50%.
50% in addition. So,
yun ang nalagay natin sa Create.
Yes, Mr. President. Tama.
Okay, so it's just a policy. That's not a mistake. That's a policy. Pero okay, so
It's not a mistake,
Yeah,
Mr.
it's not a
President.
mistake.
Correct. It's not a mistake. So this is really to make us more competitive. So that we can compete with our neighbors.
Kung ganyan lang po, bakit na lang why don't we trust the FIRB, the super body that we created, na yung mga ganyan details, sila na ipaubayan na natin sa kanila?
Because, Mr. President, in Create, there's also limits to the incentives that we gave. Like, for example, the example that I gave on deduction, we only limited it to up to 50% additional deduction, Mr. President. So we increased it by double, so that corporations can enjoy additional 100% deduction, Mr. President.
Okay, no, I get it. As a business expense deduction ba ito?
Business expense deduction.
So before we can come up with the taxable income
Correct.
of the,
Correct,
of
Mr.
the
President.
corporation. Okay.
So because may nakakap na siya ng 50%. So FIRB cannot go beyond 50%. No, so
Parang sa IBET ba ito na yung mga training expenses ginanon din natin?
Yes,
yes,
correct. Yes,
just
correct.
to incentivize.
Tama.
Parang ganun.
Correct.
Apo.
But IBET is also much broader, Mr. President. It goes beyond registered businesses.
Yes,
So
I know.
so even though you're not registered, and then you take advantage of the IBET incentives, you're qualified.
So instead of us directly addressing the issue of why electricity prices are very high in the Philippines, ganun na lang inisip natin na hindi, ipa-minus mo na lang sa mga
Correct,
korporasyon
Mr.
para
President,
pumunta
because,
sila rito.
Because
So, do you think that will work, Mr. President? Na parang, di ba parang make-believe lang din yung ating binibigay sa kanila na imagine that you can fully deduct high electricity costs come to the Philippines. Ganun? That will work.
Hindi
Mr.
naman siya
President?
imagine, Mr. President, because it's actual pesos and centavos. Of course, a lot of us have been trying to lower down electricity cost. It's much more complex than just passing legislation. The dynamics of the power sector is very complex. So we cannot wait any longer because our neighbors their electricity cost is way much lower than ours. No?
Di ba one reason, marami na studies yun na why foreign corporations are not attracted to invest in the Philippines is high energy cost.
Yes, Mr.
Correct.
President, we have a
But-
slide on that.
Yes,
Slide
yeah, high
40.
energy cost.
Yeah.
Merong study ba na if we now increase the energy cost deductible amount from gross income before we arrive at your taxable income, they will now come here, they will come to the Philippines, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, it's not the electricity cost and also the additional deduction is not the sole determinant whether they will come here or not. Of course, they will also look at ease of doing business, infrastructure, inflation, interest cost, labor cost, many factors. But definitely for manufacturing, I can say it with certainty, electricity will be their top of mind.
So this will lead to one line lang yan of the law, yung deductible business expense, yung power costs 100% na. These are all for the locators only?
For registered businesses, Mr. President.
Registered business enterprises.
Yes,
in
RBs.
our
IPAs.
investment zones.
Investment, yes.
As eco zones or IPA
Or
zones.
even outside the investment zones. For example,
okay.
the BOI registers a business because it's high value, it's import substituting, then even outside of the zones can be registered, Mr. President.
Basta yung following the definition of RBEs, the
Yes,
registered
correct, Mr.
business
President.
enterprises. So para po sa kanila ito. So
I will show lang yung
So
slide.
in effect, we're consciously letting go of income tax. Is there an effect on the corporate income tax to be paid
Yes,
by
Mr.
this
President.
entity? So may estimate po dyan how much?
Meron tayong estimate. So the income tax regime stays the same, Mr. President. What we are enhancing is the special corporate income tax or SCIT and also the enhanced deduction. We're just making it longer. But the income tax holiday remains the same, no, in terms of duration, 4 to 7, no? 4 to 7, Mr. President. So it's the same for ITH because ITH, government doesn't get anything. But at least for SCIT, special corporate income tax, we get 5%. And then for enhanced deduction, you get the typical CIT, corporate income tax.
Ito po 100% deductibility of electricity costs. Saan to papasok? Sa enhanced deduction?
Enhanced deduction, Mr. President. Enhanced deduction.
Okay,
siya
so
sa
once
papasok.
this kicks in, kasi siyempre may income tax holiday pa, parang immaterial pa siya during the income tax holiday?
No, immaterial
Tama
pa
ba
siya,
yun?
Mr. President.
Immaterial pa siya.
Yeah.
Pagka taxable na siya, nag-lapse na yung income tax holiday period, taxable na siya, it's either SCIT or
Yes, correct.
enhanced
Deduction siya.
regime.
Correct.
Okay, and this is where we enhance it to 100%.
Correct.
Okay, yung
Yes.
electric power. So
Yes.
we have an estimate on
Meron ba tayo? Yung foregone revenues ng ED. I saw that. Hold on.
So,
Mr.
pero by
President.
this time, ano lang muna, out of curiosity, by this time, even under CREATE, they are still all under income tax holiday period kasi 2 years pa lang.
Iba, Mr.
2 to 3
President.
years pa lang eh.
Yung sa Create, no? Yes, sa Create, yes. Oo.
Yes.
Yep, yeah, sa Create,
Yes, yung
yes.
mga,
Correct.
so even if we change now some of the details, walang maapektuhan kasi hindi pa nagki-kick in yung even yung 50%, wala pa siguro nakaka-claim.
Wala pa,
dun eh.
Mr. President. Because under the Create law, they're still operating under the ITH. Mr. President. But of
Okay.
course, they'll be very happy if they choose to go into the enhanced deduction regime, then they'll be very happy because they can now get 100% deduction instead of 50%.
Pero before we propose bills like this, di ba may mga projections din tayo? Yung ganun po, yung for example, yung 50% deductible to 100%. Anong projection natin doon?
In foregone revenues.
Foregone, yes, foregone income, corporate income tax payments. Di ba mahaba ito? Dati 17 years pa yung pinagsasabi mo na pagbilang. Magkano kataling income tax? 16 million. Pagkatapos mo, pag mag-expire mo, NIRC na ay normal ano?
Ito.
Pag ACIP pa rin. 16 million. Ano ACIP? 5% gross income. Ang lit naman. Ilan yung
Mr. President, we'll just flash a slide. Slide 21, Mr. President.
regular minus na. Sige po.
So slide 21, let's flash it. Medyo maliit lang, Mr. President. But in the second...
Hindi po medyo, sobrang liit po, Mr. President.
Sorry, Mr. President. Sorry, Mr. President. Dami kasing data, Mr. President. In the second row, yan po, in second row lang. CIT RBE under enhanced deduction regime, additional power expense from 50 to 100. So in 2024, foregone revenue is about 16 million. Then 2025, 158. Then 2026, 165. And so on, Mr. President. So that will be the foregone revenue. Or foregone taxes, Mr. President, to be
Yes,
exact.
yes. Foregone taxes nga. Tapos yung isa nating proposal is yung pang ano pa, di ba? Pati yung VAT refund for tourists. Foregone ano din yun?
Yes,
Yes, foregone... Anong
Foregone
tawag mo doon?
revenue.
Foregone tax din yun.
Foregone taxes
It's a
din,
VAT
Mr.
tax. Yeah.
President.
So parang lumalakas ata ang loob ng Republika ng Pilipinas, Mr. President.
Hindi naman, Mr. President.
May we know the underlying basis for the confidence that
Well, Mr. President,
we can afford to forgo collection of some taxes. Mr.
Well,
President.
Mr. President, after the rationalization of incentives, and we saw that the cost benefit is contributing to the country, that means the regime is performing well, no, in terms of positive cost benefit returns. So that's why there's still room to give some more incentives, and these are not free incentives, because what we want is to make our investment climate competitive. So in exchange for those incentives that we will be given in the future, businesses will come in. So this type of businesses should be registered. So it's not just ordinary businesses. They have to pass the strategic investment priorities plan. They also have tiers to follow. So in other words, these are going to contribute to our economy and will create value for our country.
Pero Mr. President, during the time of create, narinig ko na rin yung words na ganyan. So it's just exactly the same thing. I mean, how come create failed? Can we say that create failed?
No, Mr. President,
Is create a failure?
No,
Oh,
Mr. President. I won't
So,
say it's a failure, but this is an enhancement, Mr. President. So I wouldn't say it's a failure, but definitely it needs some more enhancement considering the situation and considering that we just came out of the pandemic, Mr. President. So this type of investment strategy should be reviewed and should be proactive, because again, we're not just competing with ourselves, we're competing with other jurisdictions who's also reviewing, lowering down and giving more incentives to corporations coming into their jurisdictions, Mr. President. So, ibig sabihin, laban-laban to, Mr. President. So, we have to be
Oo nga, pero
dynamic.
it's the national legislature monitoring the other economies of the world and then reacting. Hindi ba kaya nga ginawa na nga natin yung structure na may FIRB na nga dyan? It's a government administrative agency. Sila ngayon na mag-research ng all over
Correct.
the world, and then sila mag-crunch ng numbers, and then sila instruct sa IPA nila itong ating harmonized and rationalized system of incentives. Hindi ba? That's it.
Yes, Mr. President.
That is
and-
clearly placed in
Yeah.
CREATE, Mr. President.
And that's precisely what we did, what they did, Mr. President. This is a collaboration between FIRB, DTI, and the other stakeholders, especially the stakeholders, Mr. President, because, for example, we collaborated very closely with the semiconductor industry, SAPI, and they were the ones who were telling us that Vietnam is very aggressive in terms of giving out incentives, particularly to semiconductor industries, because their view is companies like Apple, Samsung, who's moving out of China, and Vietnam is just within their landmass, will prefer to move to Vietnam rather than to other countries. So they lower down dramatically their investment, or they improve dramatically their investment regime to attract this type of companies to go into their country. So, in other words, we also need to be dynamic in that sense, because the countries are also changing their investment regimes, Mr. President.
Yes, but let's pursue this dynamism concept introduced by our sponsors. So, if you want to be dynamic, so the power must be lodged in a body which is more, anong tawag mo doon? Yung mas maliksi ba? Mas maliksi kaysa agile, more agile than the national legislature. Oh. So what feature in CREATE, are we pursuing this idea in the CREATE
okay.
more? Are we empowering or devolving this agility to an administrative agency?
We're actually, Mr. President, we are improving the ceiling of incentives that they are giving. For example, longer duration, more deductions that they can give. And we're also giving some more powers to the President for large-scale investments. For example, in our proposal, let me just get the power of the President. Dito sa matrix to give incentives. Okay. Yeah. But Mr. President, for example, the power of the President, Mr. President, we gave additional power to the President in terms of giving non-fiscal support packages, Mr. President. So that's the flexibility and dynamism that we injected in terms of giving the President some more powers.
Not found in CREATE, not found in the CREATE law.
It was also in CREATE, but we also enhanced it, Mr. President.
But has that power in the CREATE law ever been used by the President, Mr. President? Not yet. Kasi
Not yet, Mr.
2 to
President.
3 years old pa lang yung law, so wala pa.
Wala pa, Mr. President.
So tayo, sa Pilipinas, wala pa tayong empirical data on how our law has functioned, and yet may nag-anticipate na tayo na kailangan na siyang baguhin agad.
Well, Mr. President, again, we look at the investment climate in the region, Mr. President. We need to be responsive to that. If we are not getting the desired results, especially returning to pre-pandemic levels, then we have to respond to that, Mr. President.
So if the sponsor lang knows, can he describe how the investment climate in the region has changed, Mr. President? From the time we were deliberating on CREATE and then now, how has the investment climate in our part of the world changed, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, some of the studies that we saw, like for example in Vietnam, they offered much more generous fiscal incentives. In fact, they offer subsidies for plants, manufacturing in particular, to move into their country. They also offered land tenure for semiconductor companies to go into their country. So in our analysis, Vietnam is one of the most competitive when it comes to granting of incentives, Mr. President. And to talk about, of course, this is outside of this bill, but related to the VAT refund for tourists. I just want to mention this. We also saw in other countries giving visa-free for tourists for high-level income countries, Mr. President. So, for example, Thailand has now allowed visa-free for Chinese tourists staying there for 60 days. So the example here is countries are responding. And the goal here is to at least go back to where they were, before the pandemic. So we also need to be dynamic in that sense, Mr. President. So we have a whole list of different countries that enhance their investment climate in order to attract investors, Mr. President. And then we can furnish
Sige,
the
if we
good
can
minority
just,
leader.
If we can ask for. Okay, so
Yeah, we can furnish the
so
good
before
minority
we,
leader
before we
with that.
suspend my termination, Mr. President, kasi I promised the presiding officer I will stop before 7 p.m. Ito na lang para po mapaghandaan din namin yung topic na ito. Meron po tayong natatanggap na reklamo against the CREATE law. Tama. Confirm po ng ating sponsor.
Tama, Mr. President.
Ano po doon? Ano yung anong yung pinaka so-called na lang na ano word na yun? Pinaka-concern ng ating mga business people or investors dito at saka yung mga nagsabing hindi sila pumunta rito dahil sa itong seksyon ng CREATE law na ito. So may we know which is that most controversial or most discouraging part of the CREATE law?
Actually, one of the most controversial, and this issue came out many times during our consultation with existing registered businesses, Mr. President. I always view that we should take care of the existing investors, existing registered business enterprises in our country, because they're the ones who will expand, hopefully, further in our country. They're the ones also who will market our country in their host country, or in their country of origin, Mr. President. So it's important to take care of them because they are our promoters. And one of the most controversial, or probably the controversial, is the application of directly and exclusively use requirement to avail of VAT zero rating and VAT exemption as well, Mr. President. So, in other words, in order to enjoy VAT zero rating and VAT exemption, in CREATE law, it was specified that your expenses should only be directly and exclusively. And that became a very restrictive provision for our existing investors. And obviously, if it's restrictive to them, most likely they will tell potential investors that this is a problem for their existing operations.
Meaning to say that the RBEs are complaining that although they are saying that the transaction is VAT zero rated or should be VAT exempt, the BIR does not agree with them.
Correct. In short, tama.
And then they're looking at the same section of the law.
Yes, Mr.
Tama.
President, tama.
They're reading the same section, iba conclusion nila.
Correct, Mr. President. Tama, Mr. President.
Okay,
so
so-
that's the expectation and the actual application is.
What section ba?
It's scattered all over the law, Mr. President. but
It's the term.
it's a
yes.
term directly and exclusively,
How
Mr.
many
President.
times does it appear in the CREATE law, Mr. President?
I think about 3 or 4, Mr. President, but it's scattered in the law. But it's in the application of VAT zero rating, VAT exemption, and duties exemption, Mr. President.
Yes, payment duty exemption in the importation, no?
In the
Mr.
importation,
President?
Mr.
Yes.
President, correct. Ilang times?
And Can we quantify? Can we quantify kaya what is the amount disputed? Yung sinasabi ng RBEs na because we are covered by these sections, we are no longer expected to pay this amount of tax. Sabi ng BIR, we disagree. You should pay this amount. So meron na ba study na
We'll get the
how
exact
much?
number.
Pero
Anecdotally, marami, Mr. President, because when I went to PEZA, when we had the consultations here, and when we went to Clark, we have there's anecdotes that a lot of their expenses are disallowed by the BIR because of the directly and exclusively feature in the CREATE law. But we'll get the exact number, Mr. President.
sige, before we suspend kasi 7 p.m. na. Ito lang po para lang mapaghandaan. And how did we address this in the bill?
Yes, Mr. President, we addressed that. Do I answer it right
Yes,
now,
yes,
Mr.
now,
President?
yes.
Kasi 7
Sige
o'clock
po,
na,
oo
Mr.
nga,
President.
para mapag-aralan po natin.
We changed the terminology to directly attributable, making it more expansive and making it more realistic in terms of the operations of the RBEs, Mr. President. And I can go into detail later on,
yes.
Mr. President.
So the 3 to 4 times that the phrase...
6 times, Mr. President.
6 times?
Yeah. Ilan?
Ilan? Sa
3 times, sorry. 3 times.
3. Okay, 3.
Sabi mo, 6.
Sa 3 times na ginamit and directly and exclusively used sa CREATE law, in all those instances, papalitan ng phrase directly
Attributable, Mr. President.
And the sponsor believes that will solve the problem.
Yes, and we further define the term directly attributable in consultation, of course, with our stakeholders and the DOF, Mr. President. So that will resolve the controversy in terms of enjoying your VAT incentives.
Did the CREATE law define also the phrase directly and
No,
exclusively?
Mr. President, it didn't define it.
Wala.
It didn't define it, Mr. President. In fact, it was a surprise to many, Mr. President. But in fairness, it was I think a lot of the RBEs accepted it, but in practice, they had problems in terms of how to claim their VAT zero, to enjoy their VAT zero rating and VAT
Hindi nga
exemption.
recognize eh. Di ba? The claim that you
Oo,
can,
hindi
hindi
disallow.
sila denied ng BIR that
Correct.
you,
It
that
is
you
the-
can even use this section.
Correct, Mr. President. I'll give you an example, Mr.
Sige,
President.
ginaganahan natin sponsor, Mr. President. Sige po.
Quick example lang, Mr. President. Like for example, janitorial services. Now, this is common to all businesses, but since it's not categorized as directly and exclusively, the expense for janitorial services is always denied, Mr. President, or not accepted by the BIR. But we all know businesses, especially service businesses like call centers, cannot operate without utility in janitorial services. No? Babaho naman yung kanilang banyo because these are labor-intensive businesses. So a lot of the IT BPO service companies had problems in applying for their VAT zero rating, Mr. President.
Sige, basta Mr. President, ang klaro, papalitan natin yung phrase na ginamit ng CREATE law na hindi naman siya din define kasi sa law.
Tama,
That
Mr.
phrase
President.
directly and exclusively used, papalitan ng directly attributable, and the bill defines that phrase.
Correct, Mr. President.
Sige, does it define and also gives examples? Bigyan natin, posible. Sa period of amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, we gave examples.
Gamitin
That's just
natin
to make
yung
sure.
use them generis ba yun? Yung ano?
Yeah.
Gamitin natin yung prinsipyo ng use them generis na, you know, when you
Yes, we gave
when you
examples.
enumerate items, then makikita yung common feature nila, then all the other items are deemed included or covered by the enumeration, Mr. President. Use them generis.
Yes, Mr. President, we included some examples, Mr. President.
Sige po. And then so I think, Mr. President, we will end on an exciting note, Mr. President, because this is actually siguro we can say that dito yata mariri-invigorate yung
Tama, Mr.
mga
President.
existing RBEs natin na kumaayos ito.
Correct.
Some who are entertaining the thought of leaving will
Yes,
stay.
Mr. President,
Ah,
that's true.
Okay,
No?
and then because of word of mouth, makikwento nila, oh, maganda rito sa Pilipinas, then we will be able to attract some people. So,
Correct.
we
Tama,
will
Mr.
we will be needing time, Mr. President, to examine this critical amendment or new feature of the bill, because we have to make sure that this will work this time.
Yes, tama, Mr.
Okay?
President.
But I just have my apprehension, because look at the words directly and exclusively used. It's very simple words. Pero yung word na attributable, nako, Mr. President, hindi ko ginagamit everyday yung word na attributable, Mr. President. Yung mga directly, exclusively, everyday natin ginagamit yun, Mr. President, na
Thank you,
salita.
Mr.
So,
President.
we have to make sure, Mr.
Yes,
President,
Mr.
that
President.
this will work.
And we're
So,
very open to suggestions, especially from our good minority leader.
yes, we
As
just need
always.
more time to study the measure, Mr. President. So at this point, I request that I be allowed to suspend my
Thank you,
interpellation.
Mr. President. I
Thank
thank the
you,
good minority leader. Mr.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. Thank you, Minority Leader. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2762.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend this session until 10 o'clock in the morning of Thursday, August 8, 2024.
Is there any objection? There being none, session is suspended until 10 o'clock in the morning of Thursday, August 8, 2024.
10 a.m.